Welcome to part 6 of this web design series. Now, by the end of this lesson, you would have put your beautiful website onto a real server online. You'll understand how it all works, and you will also have a domain name associated with your site. So for example, revelationexplored.com in my case. And people will be able to actually visit and interact with your site. Now, keep in mind, if you have just been following along and creating the same site as me, that's absolutely fine. You can then, once you're confident with web design, with HTML, with CSS, with Bootstrap, you can go back and create your own site. And of course, you can come back to this video and follow the steps to get yourself online. Now take a few seconds to read this lovely quote by Mother Teresa. And I could expand on this by suggesting that actually all of us can do great things, because the one true and the greatest things we do are the things that we do with love. But linked to this, I want to focus on the idea that great things are really, certainly at first, small things in disguise. Now, sadly, in the world, most of us are preoccupied with greatness being linked to financial success. There's this idea of becoming huge and successful. Now, there's nothing wrong with this, but as we've discussed, the motivation and the heart and the purpose behind it is all the more important. And now, for this session's main focus, we want to look at a web idea that started really, really small. It's actually not on the list, not on the picture on the screen, but then it really exploded. And this example is going to lead us into an understanding of web hosting, a term that you really need to understand, and you might want to look it up. So web hosting, and that's what you're going to need to put your website online. So once upon a time, there was a boy called Mark Zuckerberg. Many of you have heard of him. Well, we'll find out. Here he is with some friends. Presumably that's at university. And here he is on his Sony Vaio laptop. Famous Sony Vaio laptop. The first version of Facebook, which is what he created, it was run from his own personal computer in his dorm room. And Facebook had no cash, or he had no cash to actually run the business, and he operated it for the first few months for $85 a month. And that was the cost of actually renting a server. And he had to borrow that money. Now you can imagine the person who lent that money to Mark. So Facebook's first server. So how did Facebook support its early operations, and how did it pay for those wildly expensive servers? Not really. Well, initially they used banner ads. And you can see a picture there called The Facebook behind the picture of Mark Zuckerberg. That's what the early Facebook looked like, and it was called thefacebook.com. Now, Facebook now has millions of users. And Facebook servers, so when I talk about a server, I'm really talking about a computer, but it covers entire geographical locations. And the pictures there show the scope. Now remember that they started off and managed up to 1 million users on a single server. That's a single computer. You starting out are not going to need, I hope, well, you never know, an entire geographical location, but you would need a computer to store your website on if it's going to go live as a website that other people can see across the internet. Now, before we do that, we need to really understand what a website is in the first place. So you've made a website. You've either made the same website as me, or you're going to make your very own website, and you've stored it in a folder. Now, it's strange to think that your website is just that folder. Literally, that is all it is. Until we've actually built a website, we tend to think of websites very abstractly, but all a website is just files and assets like videos and images in folders, and that's all. So at the moment, you've opened your website on your local machine, and you can see it in your browser. But if I wanted to visit your website, I wouldn't be able to do that. So how do you get everyone on the internet to be able to view your website and interact with it? Well, you need to host it on a server. And this is what this lesson is about. So what does it mean to make your website live, or to host a website? Hosting a website means that you put your website files on a special computer called a server. Now, this computer will make your website files publicly accessible on the internet, so anyone can visit it. A web server, again, look up this term, but in order for other people around the world to see the website, these special computers are usually more powerful than an ordinary computer, have a particular set of software installed as well, and this software is called a web server. A web server's basic job is to receive incoming requests and respond by sending the page to the user's browser. Now, there's many hosting providers, so in order for you to get your website online, you're going to have to find someone who's going to host your website. So you could, there's lots of different options. You could buy your own server and you could set it up at home. Now, this is, if you were into that sort of thing, you could do that. It's not extremely difficult, but it would mean that you'd need a dedicated internet, probably a high-speed line, and you'd always need to leave that computer on. Luckily, thousands of companies actually do this for you. You're buying or you're renting a piece of their server or computer, and then they host your website for you. So all websites on the internet use a web hosting company, or most websites, to host their websites. Even tech giants like Netflix, which is hosted on Amazon, and PayPal, which is hosted on Google Cloud Hosting, they actually use third-party service providers for their hosting. So there's three options. There's shared hosting, there's a VPS, which stands for Virtual Private Server, and there's a dedicated server option as well. And starting out, you're going to go for the shared hosting, which means you're just renting a little piece of a computer to put your website on. There's only a handful of companies like Google, Microsoft, and Amazon that completely host their services on their own platforms. And they can do this because they have the technical, the financial resources to take on such a huge task. All other businesses, including us, we use a web hosting company to host websites. So there are three different types of hosting. There's, like I mentioned, shared hosting. The next step up is a VPS, a virtual private server, and you have a dedicated server. Shared hosting is really where you have a piece, so that the picture really shows it all. VPS is one step up, so you own more of that PC. So you have more power, more processing, more RAM, more space. And a dedicated server means you actually own the entire server. Of course, they go up in price as you go up. The cloud is also amazing. It's revolutionary. Cloud hosting plans offer scalable server resource allocation. And it's based on this thing called hardware virtualization, where you have a dedicated server. There are plans which include a fixed allocation of isolated RAM, CPU, SSD, storage, and these can typically provide better performance and increased security for business applications. So one of the things you could look into if your business grows is, do you want to store it in the cloud? It's scalable, reliable, flexible, lower cost, or do you want to have a dedicated server? That's one of the questions we asked ourselves, certainly as we were growing as a company. Now, there are many other small web hosting companies that these are really the ones that you should be considering at this point. It's things like Bluehost and GoDaddy. We've used those before. We know that they're very reliable. Thousands, millions of people use them. So I'm going to suggest, if you are willing to buy some web space, I would go with Bluehost, or even better, go with GoDaddy. And I'm not paid to suggest them. This is not a paid promotion. It's just because we use them, we know how they work. But you can use anything. At shared hosting level, really, all of them are pretty much the same. Now, you can also buy a domain name. So say your website was called bensburgers.com. You can actually search, you can type in, just Google buying a domain name, and you can buy a domain name. And then you can point your domain name to your website. And we'll look at how to do that in a minute. So we'll come back to these slides. You might want to pause the screen and read these steps. And if you want to do it completely free, which I'm assuming if you're a student, that's what you want. We're going to look at how to do this all completely free, and I'm going to take you through it step by step. So the first step, if you want to do this free, is to go to this site here. I've researched a couple of websites which provide free web space. This is one of them. You might be able to find a better one, but whatever you do, try and find one with a cPanel, because it's really easy, really useful, great for beginners to start up with. So find a free web hosting company with a cPanel, and again, please pause the screen so that you can come back to this or take a picture of it, and these are the steps to put your website online. The second step is going to be to actually find a domain name, and again, you can do it free using freenom.com, and I'll show you that. I'll demonstrate that in a minute. The other option is to obviously buy web space or buy a domain name with GoDaddy. So let's move on to the demonstration now, where we actually look at how this is all done. And if you follow along step by step, you'll have your website up and running in a few minutes. So let's get started with putting your website online. Now, one of the first things you might want to do is actually buy a domain name. I'm going for the paid option first. You absolutely don't have to, but if you are creating a business for someone real, a real client, they might want to, and this is how you would do it. So if you were doing it with GoDaddy, you don't have to. You could go with namecheap.com or easily.co.uk, for instance. All of these companies and many more sell domain names. You search for a domain name, and it will usually tell you if the domain name that you were looking for is available. Let's have a look. So I can see that that's available for 99p for the first year, which is not too bad. I could add it to cart. Now always look at the small print. It probably suggests that for the next year it's going to be $11.99. You should be able to cancel. But for now, let's just purchase that and show you what it would look like. You can say no thanks to all of these, and you don't want to be using their web builders, so you just say no to that, and then you continue to cart. And I'm left with just that. So it's actually $9.99, where it said initially it was going to be 99p. So it sort of draws you in like that. Now, if you're willing to invest in a domain name, find one which is really suitable, and of course it's a worthy investment for your business. .coms are very valuable. .ios are often used by startups and tech startups. .org is often for non-profit charities. So if you're starting a commercial business, you might not want to have a .org. And then you have different types of different dot suffixes. So for now, I'm just going to purchase that. And while we're doing that, let's have a look at how you can host your website. So that we will come back to in a second. And this is called two-factor authentication, where it's asking me for me to put in a code that they've sent to my phone. Let me just quickly do that. 875 in this case. Now, while we're doing that, we can also look at our website. So our entire website is held in here. I've got the image, I've got the logo, I've got my video there, I've got the different pages, and I have the index page all linked up, beautifully done. The first thing you're going to do is you're going to actually compress this into a zip file. So if you right click on it and say send to compress zipped folder, what it does, it's not a very big file, so quite quickly it should give you a zip file. It might look slightly different, but this just means it's compressed and it's ready to upload somewhere without too much difficulty. So again, I'm going to just pay for that. Seems to have gone up again because it's added taxes and fees. So let's put that through. And if we go back to our PowerPoint, and again you can bookmark or just pause the screen here. This site appears to give you free web hosting. Now remember, if you're willing to pay for it, you can use GoDaddy, you can use Bluehost, and they will just often, you can get something for $2.99 a month, ranging from $2.99 to $9.99, depending on how much space you want, how fast you want it to be, etc. But for now, let's just go with a completely free option. If your site takes off, you might want to take it off here and put it on something a bit bigger and more reliable. So I'm going to sign up for an account here. Let's see if that's gone through. It has gone through. Brilliant. I'll show you how to manage that in a minute. So if I go to sign in or get started, presumably, free sign up, I put in an email address, so you can use any email address that's suitable. And it says password must contain something, so let's try that again. And we sign up for an account. Now while this is loading, it's going to come up hopefully to a screen which is going to give you the option to get into what's called a cPanel. It's also asked me for a confirmation email. So it's a good handy thing just to have your email at hand. There, it's come through. So I verify my email. Great, and it should take me back to the site, and I should be ready to now upload my website. Email verified, get started. Now, this particular company asks you what you want to do. You can see the options here. You can build an online store, you can do a whole bunch of things, but actually at this point we would just like to put our own website online. So let's skip all of this. Let's name our project. So I'm going to call it Revelation Explored. That seems to be the password, so I'll submit that. Make a note of your password. And it's probably setting up a dashboard for me, which is great. And it gives you 3 options. Now, obviously, if you didn't know anything about web design, you might use their drag and drop website builder, which is a bit like Wix or Weebly. But what we're going to do is be a proper web developer, and we're going to upload our site. So we click Upload Our Site. Now, in every cPanel, you have what's called a public HTML. In some web hosting providers, it's called htdocs. So either way, it's either going to be called public HTML or htdocs. You need to click inside that folder, and it's inside that folder that you upload your website. So remember, your folder is public HTML. That's like the public area into which you put your website, and you click into it, and then you proceed to actually upload your website. So if I look at the options here, it should somewhere give me the option of uploading something. Permissions, compress, upload files. So I click on upload files, I select files, of course I'm uploading it from here, and I'm uploading my zip file. It's reasonably small, so hopefully they have enough space to host this for me. It might not, because it is free, and it does have a video in it. So that's going to take some time Once that's uploaded, I'll show you how you can see your website online and then link it with your domain name that you just bought. So if I go back to my domain name, this is my GoDaddy products list. And you can see down here that somewhere, probably, that I've bought Revelation Explored. So I click on it. It's quite interesting. It's telling me that the estimated value of this is £1,000 already, but that's questionable. And then what you do is you scroll all the way down and it says Manage DNS. In your projects where you were looking at DNS, you know that stands for Domain Name Server. And that's basically where you actually manage your domain name and you point it to your website. So there's a complex way of doing it, but the easy way for now is really you go down to forwarding, you click on add, and then once you have your website address, you simply stick it in here. And that domain name, revelationexplored.com, will point to where you've put it on your web hosting company. You can choose forward with masking or forward only, and you can look into what these things mean. So for now, let's go back here. And let's see if it's actually uploaded my site. It's still on 24%, so let's just wait for that to finish. So you can see that this has been uploaded there. Sorry, I just made these extra 2 folders just as an experiment there. And what you'll find in these free web space providers is that they give you a very small amount of space. Now usually, if you have a paid account, you can just click on extract, delete that, and click on a dot, which it will extract it to this public HTML folder, and you're done. But it's not letting me do it, probably because of space. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to delete this, and very sadly I'm going to go back. I have a copy of my site here in which I'm going to delete the logo, I'm going to delete the video, which I've done already, and I've just got these 3 pages, which together these shouldn't take up too much space. So I'm going to now zip that and see if this works. And this is one of the reasons it is better to just, if you can afford it, to pay for some web space. This particular site can offer it from about 99p a month, but from looking at this, I wouldn't recommend it. I would again recommend Bluehost or GoDaddy, which are used and tried and tested. So you upload that. There's hardly anything in it, so it's instant. Let's try and extract it now. So I go extract and put in a dot, which means extract it to this folder. It's still coming up with an error. Now, if it is still coming up with an error, a simple thing you could do is, of course, you could just upload the files yourself. So in the public HTML, remember it always has to be in this public HTML, ignore that. You go to upload files, and let's manually go into our, see if it lets me do three at once. I just go like that and upload. It uploads the files. So I've now got 3 files, including an index HTML. So if I click on that, you can edit it in the application now. You've got your 3 files. The question now is to actually find out the web address. So this is just for you to open and edit the HTML online. So I'd suggest the best way is just to go back to the main page, sign in, and it gives you your dashboard. Let's do that. Hopefully it'll let me in. Just log in again. And it takes you to your dashboard. You can see that this site is running and it gives you the web address. So there we are, we've got my site. It's a bit meager looking because it doesn't have the, it's got all the pages working, but it doesn't have the video, which is quite sad. I could try to manually upload that, but let me just try it in a minute. But for now, what you can see is that it works. It's Revelation Explored dot something something, and anyone can visit this site now, and they would come up to your site. But of course, you want the domain name that you've just bought to point to this. So if you went back to GoDaddy, where I told you I'd actually bought the domain name, you can simply paste in this. So that, if you pasted that into GoDaddy over there, well, that site would now point, the URL or the domain that I've just purchased, which is revelationexplored.com, would now point to that site. And that's as simple as that. But of course, if you don't want to buy a domain name, we can try and do it for free. So let's have a look at that. So we go back to this page here. You can just freeze the screen. And we're going to type in freenom.com, which is going to give you a free name. Again, I wouldn't recommend this for if you're doing a real business, but it's great as a practice. Now, this site is a little bit buggy sometimes, so I would suggest as soon as you go into it, click on English or wherever you are to make sure you get to the screen where it says find a free domain name. So I'm looking for Revelation Explored, check availability, and it gives me all the available ones. It tells me that that's gone. Well, it's telling me it's still there, which doesn't, if I actually tried to buy it, it wouldn't be there. But these are paid. So this is completely free, .tk.ml. So suppose I wanted that, I can say get it now. And then I check out. And you can see it's £0, it's free. I just want it for a month, suppose. And here, you simply put in that web address, or this web address here. So you copy that, you forward the domain, and you actually put it in there. It's quite a long one, right? And then you say continue. So revelationexplored.tk will point now to your website that you've hosted on 00 web host file, which is a hosting provider. So you click continue. And then it says total due today. You need to put in an email address. I just entered a random email address. You need to check that email address. Let me just check. There's lots of little steps to do for everything. So you can see a free nom verification. So you click on that. That tells them that you're a real thing. You put in your little details. Click on complete order. So it says total due today is £0, which is great. And I think it's probably has done it now. So the idea is that now if I typed in revelationexplored.tk, it would take me to this website, which is fabulous, and it actually works. And obviously it has this really sort of ugly thing because you're hosting it free. But if you did want to do it properly, you would buy it via sort of a recognized domain provider like GoDaddy or namecheap.com, and then you could actually point it without it coming back to this. But it does actually work. So revelationexplored.tk takes you to this website now, and anyone in the world can visit your website. If I was to go back to this, you can try and recreate inside the public HTML your folder. So if I said video, remember that was the name of it when we created our thing, and if I made another folder called images, and let me just try, might not work, I'm going to go into this video folder and I'm going to try and upload my video because that was the best bit. It's quite sad not to have it. So video, It is quite large. I maybe should have tried to compress it. Really, all that remains for you now is to think about your final idea, get it done, and then consider if you really want to pay for web space or pay for a domain name, or just experiment and use a free .tk domain name for now. It is worth shopping around or looking around, doing some research, and by all means please get back to us if you can find a better free hosting provider. There must be thousands of them out there, which is student friendly, which has a cPanel. That would be really good to know. So that's all for now on web hosting, domain names, and uploading to a free web server. So I did actually go back to the site, and I noticed that if you set up your folders, if you set up a video, an image folder, and you separately upload your video and your images, it will actually work. So that's good news. So what do you do now? Make sure you have completed the following. You signed up to a hosting provider. You could use the one that we suggested, or you could find a better one. It's completely up to you, but make sure it has a cPanel. Just make it easier. Make sure you host your site inside the folder called public HTML. And keep in mind that might also be called, in some sites or in some providers, it might be called the htdocs. So just look out for that. You can purchase or you can obtain a free domain name from freenom.com, and then of course you need to point your domain name to your site. Now please make sure that you refine your site, you check for spelling mistakes, you check that you're happy with it before you obviously make it live and you tell people about it. If you are interested in back-end design, which would make you a full-stack developer. A full-stack developer is someone who deals with the front end, the visuals, the beautiful, the HTML, the CSS, and the JavaScript, but also the back end and getting the login functionality to work, the sign-up, having a database. We'd highly recommend this 5-part series, which is really aimed at A-level students and beyond, which is Intro to Flask, and you're actually using Python in the back end to get the back end and all the sign-up, login, database functionality to work. So that's perhaps your next step if you're looking at being a professional full-stack developer.